The smoke of Satan. Hello, my name is Joseph Tiller Jr. This is The Smoke of Satan, a series of videos, there'll be 15 in all, which address the problems in the church and Pope Pius X's losing battle against the Modernist Heresy, which is based on Pascendi Dominici Gregis, his Encyclical. And this is episode 2, which we will talk about the Modernist as philosopher. Okay? And the smoke of Satan comes from a quote from St. Paul VI, who said, "We would say that through some mysterious crack," no, it's not mysterious, "through some crack, the smoke of Satan has entered the Church of God." I believe that the smoke of Satan is what Pope Pius X was fighting in what he called the Modernist Heresy. Okay? So, let's talk again a little bit about the correct traditional view of theology, because I don't want anybody to think, I don't want you to get the wrong idea that this is a good thing. The Nouvelle Theology has got serious problems that causes it to collapse. It's not a good thing. So in traditional theology, we have twofold sources of knowledge. We have our senses and our reason. We can reason that there is a God. We can reason that he will reveal himself. But we can't know God that way. We need external revelation of God to us. And that is this order of grace, which St. Thomas identifies. And we also have a twofold end. So we have a natural end and a supernatural end. Okay? And the Nouvelle Theologie, what they call ressourcement, they use modern philosophy as a basis, which is more agnostic and atheistic. And in using that, they eliminate this whole order of grace and external divine revelation, say that that's off limits. Everything can be known through your senses. Religion becomes a kind of fulfillment of a need because of some lack of things that you can fill in with your philosophy, in natural philosophy. So it is in the realm of unknown. Anything that's not the unknowable is in the realm of science and history and not for religion. Okay? So, now, what Pope Pius, he has some criticisms of these things. He says it's based on Agnosticism, so everything relates with the phenomenon, and it cannot recognize God. Well, that's a problem for Catholics, right? Science and history, it must be atheistic. God is not an object of science. So you can't really study God as part of science and his operation in his universe as part of science and not a subject of history. So God doesn't work in history, even though we know in the Bible he did. We even know that in the revelations at Fatima, which were not very long ago, in 1917, everybody saw the miracle of the sun, which can't be explained by science. So, we know God is working in the physical universe, but they say, no, that's off limits, right? And it excludes, natural theology, the motives of credibility, because it kind of merges all, reason and theology all together into one thing. So there's no separate natural theology. And there's no external revelation. Okay? Now, Pope Pius X, being a good pope, right, he's going to look to the doctrine of the deposit of faith, and he's going to find out whether this is legitimate or not. And he's going to tell you where it doesn't fit. Okay? So, he identifies in one place where this has been anathematized, where God can be known by reason. He says you have to admit that, or it's anathema. And again, anathema is a curse. If anyone says that the one true God, our Creator and Lord, cannot be known with certainty by the natural light of human reason, by means of things that are made, let him be anathema. Well, that's one of the tenets of this philosophy, is that you can't, right? So anathema means let him be cursed. All right? Man can be taught through divine revelation. Here's another quote. If anyone says that it is not possible or not expedient that man be taught through the medium of divine revelation about God and the worship to be paid him, let him be anathema. Well, the premise of this theology is, in this philosophy, is that no, you can't have divine revelation. That's anathema. Cursed again. Now, divine revelation can be made through external signs. If anyone says that divine revelation cannot be made credible by external signs, and that therefore man should be drawn to faith only by the personal internal experience or by private inspiration, let him be anathema. So our friends in this modern philosophy have gathered for themselves 3 curses from Pius X, and Pius X identified them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how this bad theology works, this bad philosophy works, okay? Because this isn't good. I don't want you to think that I'm teaching you something that you should know and want to follow and think it's good. When Pius X is condemning it, he's really condemning it, okay? So don't get confused by that. This is not good. So don't think this is the way the world works, or the way Catholics should think the world works, okay? So, we talk about vital immanence, and in particular, religious immanence, which is the impulse to religion, okay? So, what we have is faith is a sentiment originating from the need of the divine. So we have some phenomenon in the physical, visible world, right? And we try to understand this through science and history. And we reached the end of science and history, so we've exhausted all the rational explanations for everything. But it still doesn't explain everything. So that gives us this sentiment that we need religion to explain this unknowable, right? So once we've reached this limit, this sentiment for the divine is produced, and this sentiment is faith and revelation. So it's of God and from God, right? This is what they believe. So your religion is kind of inside yourself, right? And you're kind of geared toward, using this to fill in the great blank that you have because you can't explain everything. Now, the problem with this is that every religion is like this, right? So that every religion is natural and supernatural, and you're trying to fill in, so what's wrong with every other religion that fills it in a different way? The unknown, right? You have consciousness and revelation are synonymous, and revelation is an internal thing. It's this kind of a religious consciousness. Again, it's heretical. There's a little bit of an irony that I see. This is my personal view, not Pope Pius X. There's a little irony in that when you remove this division between the natural and the supernatural sources of knowledge, so when you remove divine revelation from the equation, and you try to just make everything coming from our senses and our reason, it actually makes it so there's more of a division between the two things. So when you have two sources, there's interplay in the knowledge between faith and material experience. But when you do it this way and have this one source, it excludes any overlap. And that leads to some pretty serious problems. Okay. Transfiguration and disfigurement. So the problem gets worse. Okay. Faith becomes a kind of transfigurer and disfigurer of science and history. So it messes up our perception of science and history. So we have to go back and look at our science and history and remove whatever's been transfigured by faith. The faith is this desire to understand the unknown, but because we transfigure things and make them bigger than their original space, right? We make them more important, then we disfigure it because we actually kind of change the story and make it better, you know. So an example of that might be, you know, Jesus had this great miracle where he fed thousands of people, but really, you know, we can deduce back and say it's more reasonable to believe that actually he just asked everybody to share the food that they had. And it got disfigured into being a miracle where he actually made the loaves multiply. This kind of thing, you hear that from some of these guys, right? And I cringe at it because it's so wrong, right? It's just violating Scripture to make these conjectures about that's how people kind of warped the Bible. But this is what they kind of think. So things are transfigured and disfigured. The transfiguration is that we promote it above its original condition to be something bigger or better, right? And then the disfigurement is actually changing things, you know. So anything that's not, here's what he says in here. It says, anything not consistent with his character, circumstances, and education, and with place and time in which he lived must be removed. So that's this disfigurement by faith, because we kind of put things in that weren't really there, right? So, again, it's kind of a rational, atheistic explanation of the faith. This doesn't work in Catholicism. It doesn't work. And it results in something that's wicked. Okay? Now, what does Pope Pius have to say about it? Well, he doesn't buy it. And he's pretty caustic in his response. You know, he doesn't really hold back. Therefore, the religious sentiment, which through the agency of vital immanence emerges from the lurking places of the subconsciousness, is the germ of all religion and the explanation of everything that has been or ever will be in any religion. Nor is the Catholic religion an exception. And yet, venerable brethren, these are not merely the foolish babblings of infidels. There are many Catholics, yea, and priests too, who say these things openly, and they boast that they are going to reform the church by these ravings. Now, that's a guy not holding back. He's calling their philosophy ravings, you know. So he's really kind of spooked and saying these guys are going to try to reform the church with this stuff. And my belief is that in Vatican II, they ran up the white flag and surrendered to these guys, and they did reform the church based on this. And you see it. You'll see it in your churches. You'll hear it from your priests. You'll hear this kind of stuff if you have nuns and things come and talk to you about their theological speculations. This is rampant in the modern church, and it's wrong, and it's heretical, and it's not right. All right? So, wherefore, the Vatican Council most justly decreed, if anyone says that man cannot be raised by God to a knowledge and perfection which surpasses nature, but that he can and should by his own efforts and by a constant development attain finally to the possession of all truth and good, let him be anathema. Again, the denial of the work of God in the person's life, the divine revelation and the working of the Holy Spirit. You can't do that. But that's what these philosophers would like to do. And Pius X wants them out of his church. He doesn't want them messing up people's minds with this bad theology. Okay, that's the end of part 2. So in the next section, part 2 was on the philosopher. Modernist is the philosopher. The next one will be on the origins of dogma. Now, dogmas are things that are supposed to be constant and unchanging, and not so much with the way modernists think about them and what they say the origins are. But we'll get into that in the next episode. So, again, my name is Joseph Silva Jr. I write edgy Catholic fiction, but I am taking a break from it to try to guide you guys through the perilous waters that the Church now finds itself in. And I think it was all identified prophetically by Pope Pius X, who was fighting against the Modernist Heresy. So we're going to explain the entire Modernist Heresy by going through the Encyclical Pascendi Dominici Gregis. So, again, I'm Joseph Silva Jr. I've written novels, When the Wood is Dry, graphic novel, Blind Prophet, and my Christmas story, Merry Freedom Christmas, and edgy Christmas comedy, which also comes in the naughty edition. So we have the naughty, and I didn't call it the nice edition, but you could call it the nice edition. It's standard, right? So this one doesn't have the bad language in it, and it has a clever way of obscuring it. Thank you very much. We will see you in our next episode, which will be on the origins of dogma.